Hello, MedTech Insight enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt. When Dr. Bhatt isn't hosting the show, she's, well, actually,
Okay, maybe you do have to pause there today, just a little bit.
she's a leading cardiologist who built the entire Mass General telecardiology program. She has spent her entire career seeing congenital heart disease patients, teaching at the Harvard Medical School, and most recently this weekend actually did an impromptu cardiology consult with my parents. So thank you,
That's
Ami,
right.
for that.
Your parents were very sweet. They had such bright questions.
Thank you. They are doctors, so they should have some questions. But today is also just a very big and special day. I'm really delighted that Dr. Bhatt and all of her intellect and all of her accomplishments is really being recognized and elevated and taken to the next level. And we're delighted to announce that Dr. Bhatt has recently been named the new American College of Cardiology Chief Innovation Officer. Woo!
Thank you. Do I not get the 4 people who cough like this? I don't deserve it. Only our guests get that. I'll take you coughing. No, it's really exciting. It is such an honor. The American College of Cardiology has been doing such amazing work in innovation. And John Rumsfeld, my predecessor, along with a phenomenal innovation team, continues to just do good work. And I am honored to join them in the ACC. So this is going to be a great ride and a lot of great things happening with so much cross-industry collaboration. And so what a great time for people like us, Jen and I, who have such a passion for this, and all of you to be able to try and make more strides and change the way we deliver care for the better. So I'm really excited for this. And maybe in January, if it's okay, Jen, we'll take a show to invite my team to come on and we can talk a little bit about what ACC Innovation is doing once I join them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'd love to hear about what your plans are, more a little bit, because our audience doesn't necessarily know all of the deep roots that the American College of Cardiology has in terms of supporting innovation, driving innovation. I think there's a venture arm. You guys, I'm saying this as an internal medicine doctor who became a nephrologist and then now work in the ER. Ami became a cardiologist. But the cardiologist really just driving innovation and being at the lead of that and investing heavily in it. So no, this is just amazing. So I'm just so delighted.
Thank you. I'm so excited. An exciting new chapter and so many good people to collaborate with out there inside cardiology and outside. So I think it'll be great.
So just as a reminder, we both work with traditional medtech and up-and-coming digital health startups. And I think Ami's cap and ability to invest maybe has just gone up with this announcement. We both believe that healthcare can be better, both for the clinicians and for the patients. MedTech Insights is a live weekly interactive talk show where we interview 2 guest leaders. We have 2 amazing guests that Dr. Bhatt is going to introduce soon. We go live typically on Tuesdays at 12 noon. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. It is live and recorded, so we love to hear from our audience members. So if you are watching now, please go ahead, wherever you're watching, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, type in who you are, where you're watching from, what you're working on, and also any questions that you have for our audience. You can just see the recorded shows at Vanguard.Health /MedTech Insights or by my LinkedIn handle. You can see all the shows underneath my profile as well as on Facebook. Over to you, Dr. Bhatt.
Thank you so much. Exciting show today. As a reminder, Dr. Joe, myself, and our guests represent our own opinions and not those of the companies for whom we work or with whom we collaborate. With that in mind, we are really excited. As native Bostonians, we love the name of this company. We have Wicked Smart
I'm not
joining
a native
us
Bostonian.
today.
This is a weird.
Okay, fine. You're a native Mississippian. I hail from Jersey, but we've been here long enough that Wicked Smart is something that we appreciate. So we have Wicked Smart CEO, Michael Davies, with us today. He's the founder and CEO. This was named from the line from the movie Good Will Hunting, and as its founders come from MIT and Dartmouth. And this company began life as a home startup, not because of any other reason. They were frustrated by the idea that Alexa was able to kind of do things, and they really wanted to be able to do things at home that could be done. So for Wicked Smart, when he's not running it, Michael, who's going to tell you more about it, teaches at MIT and the London Business School, provides expert counsel on tech and antitrust legislation, and he parents his, wait for it, 5 daughters. God bless. I have 2, and I'm still standing, which I have to say I'm very proud of. But I love my daughters. They're really great. Neil and I are lucky. Mansa Shroff is the head of partnerships for Wicked Smart. She comes from a microbiology and public health background. She's excited to tackle the challenges around clinical trial diversity, privacy, and being patient-centric in digital health. She is dialing in from Mumbai, India. So thank you for coming on our time. I realize it is the middle of the night and you are keeping your eyes open for us, but really, really appreciate this. I have to say the excitement to me is to have somebody who comes from the business school perspective and somebody who comes from the public health perspective, partnering together to really improve what healthcare looks like. That is just so unique about this company, and therefore I'm excited to hear from them. So Jen, why don't we bring them both out together today?
Love it.
Michael and Mansa, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us.
Wonderful. So maybe, Michael, do you want to start us off and tell everybody a little bit about the company itself and what you guys do? And then for their interest, our audience always loves to hear, how'd you get this idea? What made you, want to do this and run with it? So a little bit about the company first, so we're all settled on that, and then how you got here.
It's a story in 2 parts. And some of it has to do with the really strange accent. I'm going to explain. This is what you sound like if you're New Zealand-born, English-educated, and have lived in America for 20 years. And I had a whole bunch of work, both personally and professionally, in doing stuff with smart homes. And about 3 Christmases and New Years ago, as you were having drinks, me and a bunch of friends who were sort of serial CTOs and professors at MIT were drinking and complaining about how dumb Alexa was and about how dumb smart homes were and how it never did what you wanted. And we said, well, we think we know how to solve that problem. We'll build a system that actually watches you with your permission and looks at you and says, what are you doing and how do you feel about it? And for some other important reasons, such as dealing with falls and emergencies, what your physiological state is. We said the technology was a couple of years away, but a bunch of us have worked together before in 3 or 4 startups. And so we set out to build a smart home startup. As happens in places like Cambridge and Boston, the tech community, the deep tech AI and Internet of Things community bumps into the biotech community. And literally, I ended up on a panel with somebody from digital health at Biogen. And I said, explained what I was doing, talking about how we were leveraging AI and actually applying it, not building AI from scratch, but actually taking the technologies as building blocks and trying to solve what we thought was a problem. And to my surprise, because I was pretty ignorant about it back then, I should say, I spend a lot of time saying, doctors tell me, because I'm not a doctor. I am an EMT, but not a doctor. And when we're doing this. So anyway, and he said, tell us more. And we went, why? And he went, we might be interested. And I go, again, why does a pharma company care about a smart home startup? And we went in, we explained what we could do. And the sort of the to and fro, we said, yeah, we actually have an application for that. We would really like for neurodegenerative diseases in particular to understand how people's function is evolving over time with great accuracy. And the current measures we have are really not very good. We went, oh yeah, whatever. We didn't really pay attention to it for a while. And then later in the summer, as we were saying, we should make a decision. Are we going to be a smart home startup? Are we going to go after this clinical trials thing? And I took myself off, I can date it precisely, on the 7th of August down to a conference called Technology, Trials and Transformation, and came out of it going, wow, we should go do this. Okay. Went back to them, said, what would it take for you to write a check? They wrote a check, we built some prototypes, we delivered the system. And the name comes about because we were trying to build a wicked smart home startup. We kept thinking we should change it to something much more serious and medical, but everybody said, no, it's really memorable. Stick with it.
We like the name. The name works for us. So I love the serendipity of it, right? We talk about cross-silo work and to have somebody interested in neurodegenerative diseases sitting next to somebody who says, I can help you assess your patient in the home, doing the regular things that they want to be able to do to just be able to live life. As doctors, we call that activities of daily living.
Yes.
And if you really think about the toll that these neurodegenerative diseases take over time on individuals, not only on their physical health, but their emotional health and their families, it is immense. And so it's really an area that needs continued work. But you're right, seeing a patient in the office, even every 3 months, is not enough to be able to tell what progression looks like, and not even progression, what those daily limitations may be and whether or not you can overcome them with a patient. So I love that. Mansa, let me bring it over to you for a second, because we talked a little bit about clinical trials and how this meeting that Michael went to really led him to say, yes, this needs to be done. Will you tell us a little bit just about your story, where you started from, and what you saw in Wicked Smart that made you want to be head of partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to discuss what AI and ambient technology can do for neurodegenerative diseases. So I could have never predicted where I am today, but I think in a very short time, I've seen many incredible aspects of healthcare. So I started my journey as a microbiologist and then went on to working at Wisconsin's Technology Transfer Office, supporting their outlicensing and market expansion programs. So that was my first exposure to the startup world, and I found it very, very challenging and incredibly evolutionary. Safe to say, it kind of gave me the idea that startup is all about putting out fires all the time, which I love. I'm sure you guys can relate to that too. Yeah. Then after I moved on to Harvard's Global Health Institute and worked on some of very pressing conversations and issues around value-based care, gene therapy, vaccines, and in the process, I got fully immersed in the startup world. I've worked with some incredible startups in the US and UK, Finch Therapeutics, Liberate Health, Medable, to name a few. And now at Wicked Smart, I bring the public health background and the understanding of the startup hustle to the digital health world. I guess overall, we're just really excited to explore how ambient technology and AI can be used to collect real-world data in neurodegenerative clinical trials.
I love that. So one thing I'll ask, and this is because one very nice person I know, her name is Amanda, and she runs Alexa. So I have to say, I will state that I'm excited about anybody who's bringing AI into the home and trying to work on healthcare. So again, equal opportunity friend to all. But I guess what I would love to know is what is unique about Wicked Smart, because there are a lot of people trying to do ambient AI, whether it's in the home or increasingly as we talk about caring for patients in the clinic, even starting to think about, whether as they come in and they're waiting, are there things that we can pick up? What is it that is driving your technology in Wicked Smart that helps the relatively lay person or the lay doctor who doesn't do AI say, hey, that's the way to capture this? Would love to hear a little bit about the technology, again, from a maybe non-fully tech audience, but a little bit more for us.
That's a great question, Dr. Bhatt. And I'm just going to ask one question because I've never heard the concept ambient AI. What is ambient AI?
That's great. Let's start. That's great. Let's start with ambient AI, and then we'll go there.
Have you been
Michael,
using ambient AI and I haven't, or maybe
yes, but that's because we travel in slightly different areas. You can't do ambient AI in the ER. There's too much stuff going on. So it's not for you just yet. Someday it will be.
Sure. So let me pick that up, because it's actually the same answer to both questions about what's different about us. And we started from the principle that you want to get really rich data, and you would ideally like to have it continuously, and you want to minimize the extent to which the gathering of the data actually affects people's behavior. You talked, Dr. Bhatt, about bringing people into the clinic. We know, both anecdotally and from the evidence, the way people behave in clinics, in clinic visits, is quite different to the way they behave in real life. And the same thing applies whenever you do something, even as something as simple as putting a wearable on. Now, for much of us, it might not do that. But the process of actually strapping on something that's going to do full motion capture means that people are thinking about how they're going to do it. They're not just living their normal lives, as you mentioned, ADL and QOL, activities of daily living and quality of life. And what you really want is real world data that is as unobtrusive as it can possibly be. And that's why we use the term ambient, because our sensors don't require you to put anything on. They gather very rich data using sensor nodes and light. Well, it's actually LiDAR, the same sort of technology used in self-driving cars to monitor how people are moving. And also, as part of that, to measure how people are feeling and the other things that are important for assessing both function and the emotional aspects of it. Now, what we're doing, and I want to pick up what you said, Dr. Bhatt, about how we're a little different because we come at it from both the tech and the business school perspective. My specialty for 20 years has been understanding deep tech and connecting it with a real business opportunity. So we're not like many companies are, oh, I have this cool technology, how could I apply it? We're not I have this narrow problem, I'm searching for a solution for this narrow problem. Having been exposed to the problem, we took a big step back, and a couple of us have systems engineering backgrounds. We thought about if you are starting from first principles, knowing what you know about the technological possibilities, how would you solve this problem? How would you make something that was great for trial participants, that was great for the people who are going to make use of the data? What is the combination of technologies that you would have to put together that was incredibly easy to be deployed, that could be deployed anywhere? And we worked through those and said, oh, this is how we would go do it, which led to some redesigns to make things that are great patient experience and to be a great experience for the people making use of the data. And in this context, when we set out to recruit the chief medical officer, I'm going to give a shout out to Danny Sands, who's agreed to join our leadership team. We went looking for someone, what's rarer than a unicorn, who was simultaneously had a background in medical informatics on the technology side driving it, and was a passionate advocate for patient experience. And through some connections, got connected with Danny Sands, who's one of the founders of the Society for Participatory Medicine, which is all about you've got to draw in the people. Because our MIT people there's a couple of us who are really quite deeply techie, but there's a couple of people who actually come out of the design schools.
Lovely.
David Rose and Blade Catelli, both of whom are design professors. And their specialty is in the user experience. So what is different about us is taking a collection of powerful technologies that are being funded by the likes of Facebook and Google and other people for different purposes, integrating them into something that's really easy and making and delivering a complete end-to-end solution. Now, as part of that, we've had to invest in some pieces of technology. And what makes us different is it is real-world data. It's ambient data. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to put anything on. It just happens in the background.
So this is so perfect. 3 things I want to point out, and then Mansa, I would love for you to show some of those slides, because I think people right now in the audience are like, wait, show it to me, because I can see that feeling coming. So the 3 things. Number 1, you found Danny Sands. You said I was looking for the unicorn. By the way, Danny's one of your friends, right, Jen?
Yeah.
Right?
Danny Sands is amazing. He's a good friend. He invented the first ever informatics course that we often forget about because it was Danny. I mean, it was like 20 years ago.
So this is part of what every time there is somebody who can be classified as a unicorn, someone unique who was doing this 20 years ago, they are friends with Dr. Jennifer Joe. I just want to put that out there. It has happened every time on this show. It is a lovely thing that I can rely on in life. So kudos to you, Jen, for always finding those people long before anyone knew that they were going to fly like this. It's really amazing.
I love the Society of Participatory Medicine. We also, JMIR publishes their journal. So if you're looking to publish with the Society of Participatory Medicine, it's through JMIR, which is it's one of the oldest, widest read digital health publications there are.
Great. Will you say the full term of JMIR for people who don't understand what you're saying?
They actually rebranded the JMIR, but it's Journal of Medical Internet Research.
Fantastic.
Yes.
But we are rebranding, so JMIR is what we will use. Okay, excellent. 2 other thoughts. The first is I love this idea of the ambient nature. And so we've talked about this before, but I'm going to bring it up again. Dr. Ada Stefanescu-Schmidt, along with Cass Sunstein from the Harvard School of Public Health, did a beautiful paper in Our Patients Here in the Clinic at MGH, and really looked at type 1 versus type 2, fast versus slow thinking. And when you come to a clinic to get your care, not only may you act differently if you have a wearable, or act differently if you're here, you actually think differently. You aren't able to slowly think and process, which means a lot of the educational work that we try to do in the office may be less effective than that what we do in the home unless we can slow people down. And so just something to remember, people act differently in different situations, and therefore the emphasis on caring for people in their home, which is where most normal life kind of happens. All right, Mansa, over to you for the slides. And as we go through what Wicked Smart does in your slides, one question that has come in is you guys are talking about clinical trial participation, and you are really, global. You are global at Harvard. You are calling us from Mumbai. How do you ensure that this kind of technology gets into trials in places where maybe they're not used to having this kind of technology around? How do we make sure that digital literacy doesn't get in the way of patient enrollment such that we are really being equitable?
Excellent.
So maybe first slides, and then you can answer that question.
Great. Michael, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. I'll keep this very simple, and then I'll try and pick up briefly on that question, which is one of our, to a bit of foreshadowing here, is as we got into this, we thought that reach for diversity inclusion was incredibly important. The challenge as we got into it was the discovery that despite the amazing amount of innovation that's going on in drug discovery and in other areas at the moment, clinical trials remain the key bottleneck. They take a long time, they cost a lot of money, and a significant proportion that actually don't produce useful results. So what we set out to do was sort of, if you tackle it from first principles, what could the potential payoff be? A few $100,000 a day for a decent sized clinical trial, millions of dollars per day if you're actually successful in getting out there. And in particular, new therapies reach patients faster. At the end of the day, better data is the only way you can do that. We saw this happen with the COVID trials, where they cracked that problem by running very large-scale trials very rapidly with very wide diversity and inclusion. So our solution, pretty simple, better data. Set out to measure smaller effect sizes with greater specificity and selectivity. So use really powerful state-of-the-art in terms of the spatial resolution for things like motion capture, having ambient audio, being able to detect people falling, and integrating that with third-party data and conventional clinical solutions. So we're measuring very rich data very continuously rather than periodically, right? But I do think clinic visits are an important complement. We're actually also working with MGH, with the neurology department at MGH, on a project funded by Mass Life Sciences Council called NeuroBooth, where we're setting out to build 30,000 very deep neurological profiles of people who are being treated for neurological disorders across a whole variety. And that's a complement to it, because that will tie it to physicians' records and the rest. And it's helping us figure out what are the critical indicators that we should be focusing on capturing in the home. So I see the two as complements. It's for the trials, you want the real world data, but it's a complement to what goes on in clinical research. And when it comes to the platform, it's pretty, well, we would say as technologists, but then I'm from MIT, it's pretty straightforward. Sensor nodes, wireless mesh connectivity in the home, the sort of thing which is if you have a good state-of-the-art wireless network you've had. Critically, to your point about how we deploy it, using 5G. And the reason for doing that is if you've ever tried to get something installed in broadband in someone's home, it's a nightmare. There's lots of things I'll provide tech support to my parents for, but I won't help them with that particular problem. It's no, you're going to have to go do with that. And that means we can deploy anywhere where you've got 5G connectivity. And as 5G gets rolled out worldwide, we drop ship it. It comes out of the box in the same sort of way as Kindle does, and it just works.
So Michael, do me a favor, because I'm going to cut you off because I'm seeing a couple of comments of, will you go into more detail about these three boxes? There are people asking you to tell a little bit more about what you're actually, and I think we can kind of sense it by looking at the pictures, but will you walk us through those pictures one time so those who are interested can really hear what is in that box that you're opening?
Sure. So inside the home, you've got three things. You've got multiple sensor nodes. Think of them as being a sophisticated version of a high-resolution camera. And to preserve patient privacy, we actually do all the processing at those nodes and then transmit it wirelessly to a hub. So if any of you remember the Jibo robot that came out of MIT, the social robot which sort of sat on the counter, one of our co-founders was the head of design there. So you have a hub which sits on the counter in the kitchen that connects those nodes together, which capture information about what people are doing, and also includes an iPad for interactivity. So that you can run cognitive tests if you want, but you could also have a conversation and do things such as support a telehealth interaction. You also have 5G connectivity there, and that runs it back to the cloud. And that is a closed system. So we don't go out over the public internet. We go straight to a secure cloud.
So go back to those for 1 second. Are they looking at movement? Are they listening to speech? Are they doing all of the above? What are they doing? Or Mansa, you're shaking your head. You can also answer.
Sure. Yeah. They're doing all of the above. So we're looking at you moving and doing motion capture. So to a resolution of a few millimeters, being able to understand what you're doing with sufficient precision that we can do quantitative measurements, for instance, for a QMA, a quantitative motor assessment, ambiently, just as you move around your home. And we can also detect things like, oh, you're eating, you're reading, you're talking. It includes text-to-speech. Again, one of our co-founders is an expert on text-to-speech. He literally actually wrote the book on IVR systems. And we do all of this in a way which actually gives the participants control over the data flows because of the issues around privacy being so important. So
tell us about that. Yeah, tell us about the privacy part and the control over data. How does that work?
Well, under normal circumstances, no video or other data ever leaves the home. And this is both a philosophical and a practical reason. We're capturing raw information at about a gigabit per second. And there's no way to pull a gigabit per second out of a home. So we do the processing to extract the clinically relevant information about motion or about the use of particular words. And what we do is we send the clinically relevant data back to the cloud. So one of the things a little bit different about us is we're doing almost all of the heavyweight processing in the home. And one of the things that dictated our timing was the available of AI hardware to run AI models that was sufficiently powerful that you could just put it on a desktop. This was not possible. When we actually launched in October 2019, we were waiting on hardware to build our first system. So it's like, and to get them up to speed.
And then you also had a box of wearables, so people can use their wearables in the house, and those are Bluetooth enabled, and that's how a signal picked up from them in the house ambiently?
Yes. So we connect them and we connect them back out so that you don't have to go do it. Again, ship them with out of the box connectivity. And we can also connect with wearables that you wear outside the home. As we've talked to customers, one of the things they'd like to complement is rich data in the home with continuous data, albeit lower resolution when you're outside the home. Great. And the idea being you do a bunch of sensor fusion. Me and our CTO previously did a bunch of work on sensor fusion, and I hold a bunch of patents on animal instrumentation, which was about motion capture for horses as it happens, where we combine data flows from lots of
my younger daughter would be so interested in that. We're going through a horse phase right now. Oh, look at that, Denise Silber.
Yeah, of course, always Danny's and Denise Silber, thanks for watching. I think you're in Paris, France. Always appreciate your insights. And Dr. Beck Mahan, CEO of CME, who I've worked with, has a good point, which is how do physicians feel about this? Have you rolled out to physicians, and what are they doing with the data?
We're at the early stages. We're validating and verifying. So we're actually in conversations with two key groups. One is Danny's leading our engagement with participants to figure out what is it that we can do to make them feel comfortable with something that's actually capturing a lot of data. Now, it's in the context of clinical trials. So you would obviously always have to be fully consented. But what is it about that? And then we're deep into customer discovery with clinicians in various favors. Candidly, we get a couple of views, and I'll let Mansa elaborate on that. We get, on the research side, people who go, more data, more data, more data. And people who practice, like Danny, for those who don't know, Danny still practices, he goes, well, I think there's some interesting issues here. We should talk about it. We're very sensitive to those issues. Mansa, do you want to elaborate? Because you've been driving a lot of our customer discovery.
Yeah. I actually wanted to take a step back and speak a bit more about COVID and how that brought everything that we're doing to light. So, given COVID, decentralized clinical trials became the new norm. Everyone accepted it. People understood what that is, which is a huge deal. Educating people, patients, and caregivers takes time, but COVID made it easier. People started understanding that at-home technology makes more sense. It's easier to access. Caregivers can, look for their patients and their customers more so, such that healthcare went from reactive to preventative, which is a huge deal for us. We're jumping a leap here, and I guess pharma also started thinking about innovation not as a problem, but as how fragmented it is. So then digital health understood that if innovation is fragmented, how do we bring it all together? And the way to bring it all together is, why don't we use patients where they're most at all times, which is their homes? Why don't we create something which is smart, which is ambient, which understands who you are as you are without having to change you as the consumer, right? So I think that really brought the focus for clinical trials into our business strategy. Now, touching upon the clinical trial problem that Dr. Bhatt had asked me, obviously this is Danny's playfield, but the little that I've learned from the process is, I think it's really important to think about patients as consumers and not use patient as a jargon, because there are some associations with that term. And when we're talking about them as consumers, we're thinking about their user interface. We're thinking about their privacy. We're trying to keep in mind how we're going to be able to help them access their data better, which is what Michael's working on. And I think with clinical trials, the really interesting bit about digital biomarkers for the audience that doesn't understand it, digital biomarkers are points of data that can be collected over a period of time, which can be used to complement your conventional clinical biomarkers, which is when you go in to get your blood test done. So it's almost like you're complementing everything you've done from a blood test perspective to everything that you do in home, club it together, and then there you have your full patient experience, which is going to, or which hopes to change your patient experience in your healthcare journey. One of the other things that we're looking to do is to track earlier in neurodegenerative space, especially focusing on Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, trying to figure out the informative behavioral pattern and cognitive impairment changes early in the game before it sets up, and then be able to help patients understand how they can use their prescribed therapy to get through that phase easily.
Mansa Shroff, I must say that is one of the best explanations of what digital biomarkers are, and the clearest that we have had on this show. Thank you. I'm going to take that clip and we're going to show it again and again, Jen, because I think that was just wonderful.
Oh, I totally love it. The concept of the digital biomarker is one of my favorite things. And I think in clinical practice, we don't actually know what to do with them yet. Maybe you've heard that already.
We're getting there.
We're collecting them.
That's great. Can I ask, I know we are running short on time now. Can I ask about 5G in India? How far is our reach? Are we able to do this? And then Michael, I'll turn it to you after Mansa kind of answers that, and say, talk to us a little bit about cost, because it would be great to see this in trials. It'd be great to see this in practice, but curious as to what it takes to do this. So I don't know, Mansa, you want to take a little on India?
I don't think they've promised to give you this in practice yet. I don't know if you can just drop a patient in for clinical trials. I think they've promised that, but not for like.
Yeah, but I'm thinking ahead.
You're thinking hospital at home, managing the patient remotely, home-based primary care type scenario.
We are moving towards a lot of hospital at home, and I think Ambient AI technology in hospital at home is going to be incredibly important. So I think for clinician practices, we're watching them do clinical trials, and we're just waiting for what comes next. But maybe Mansa first, just thinking about India, since you are there, and deployment and thoughts.
Yeah, so our primary markets are US and Europe, but India is making strides towards 5G. Hospital at home, big deal in India. People are thinking about it all the time, especially given the second wave of COVID, where India had to reinvent its healthcare from bottom up, right? And I think that spoke a lot about how fast our healthcare system is looking at decentralized digital health technologies and being able to depend on them to give better treatment to patients and caregivers. I think data is still a challenge all around the world, and I think we have to, go towards it collectively, both as business individuals and technicians and engineers and physicians, and everyone needs to come together as a stakeholder, different stakeholders coming together to figure out what do we do with this data issue. Who owns it? How do we tackle the issue? Can the patient have access to their journey at all points in time?
Lovely. Michael, your thoughts?
Let me just pick up on that technical issue. 5G, you've probably seen it in the adverts here in the US, already being trialed in India, will be deployed in India within the next year or two. Unless you think India is any way backwards in terms of its wireless internet connectivity, it actually has some of the fastest and cheapest internet connectivity in the world, and in some respects would put rural areas of the United States to shame, mostly because of a company called Reliance Jio, who said, basically, we're going to make this incredibly cheap and incredibly widely available. When we were originally looking at this, if it was going to be a consumer technology, we were starting at a high price point and we were going to progressively drive that down. So from a cost point of view, we are currently competitive with the current solutions that you would deploy in a clinical trial. We come out with better data at 20 to 25% lower per participant costs. Now, that doesn't make it a consumer product unless you're a very wealthy consumer. But all of the technologies are on a really strong cost curve. And as we look at this, it's a question of getting through the current challenges we've had in the supply chain. It's been an interesting birth because we were literally about to go into a whole variety of validation and verification trials on the 1st of April, 2020. And when we went to IRBs and said, hey, we want to bring old people with neurodegenerative diseases into a hospital in the middle of a giant global pandemic, those vulnerable populations who got it isn't happening. So we started to reemerge as vaccinations did that. And then we ran into the global supply chain challenge, which means we had to reconfigure our product roadmap and push back the first large-scale products that we'll be building in the hundreds and take a little bit more of a step-by-step approach. But the answer to your question is, it takes, if you're not experienced, and I've been doing this in my other hats on for 20 years, it takes 2 or 3 years at least to work something from, I think I know what I'm doing, to a high volume consumer product. We're probably 3 or 4 years to something that's at that price point.
It only takes 3 to 4 years. That's pretty impressive.
It takes 3 or 4 years if you're a startup and you know what you're doing. And I've been involved in doing this bunch of. One of the things we have as a startup as an advantage is when we talk to people, they go, "Oh, you're trying to build a platform and do hardware and do user interface." We go, yeah, we've done it before. Like 3 of us did this and 3 of us did that. So the founding team has built platforms, designed cloud platform services, built hardware. So things that most people would find terrifying. Yeah, we're on our field.
I would love to put words into Michael's mouth right now, and I'm openly stating that I'm doing this, but if it is collectively behind your team, your 20th startup, then it takes 3 to 4 years. These people have some significant experience, which I'm sure did not take 3 to 4 years in many of the originals, or some of them maybe didn't make it. But, I think there's so much to be said for iterating. And to those of you who are young entrepreneurs watching, because I'm looking at the list of people there, just keep at it. And some will make it and some won't, but the experience you gain from each time you do this. And Jennifer, of course, Dr. Joe can tell you the same thing. Incredible gains and strides, not only for you as an individual, but for the industry each time we try something and learn from it.
Oh yeah, we are absolutely building on some terrifying lessons with them. Prototypes that caught fire and screamed.
We need to make you more real. We need to make it seem like 3 to 4 years. You have to. You have some scars there that you've learned from.
That's right. So I'm seeing we went over by about 10 minutes, but this was just such a great discussion. Michael, a few final words about your thoughts about the direction of Ambient AI, and then Mansa, your thoughts about that as well, and then Jen, I'll give you maybe last word today.
I think it's going to become really important. I'd highlight a couple of things. We're in discussions with Critical Path and with the Sphere Project, University of Bristol in the UK, and with a variety of other people who basically said we were looking at how we get really good data, and we've come to a conclusion that we just need to measure richer data, and we need to do it ambiently. It's being reflected in things like the FDA's guidelines, and I apologize to anybody from Verily. where they slapped down that Parkinson's trial because they said, oh yeah, you've got sort of a biomarker, but you can't actually relate it to function. So more complete real world data is the direction which I think we're going to go. And in that sense, from the long run, to Mansa's point well made, COVID accelerated awareness of the power of what you can do using what you would broadly define as digital telehealth. And that is an enormous boost to our ambitions over the medium to long term.
Mansa, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I just mirroring what Michael said. I think it's really important for digital health to now think about patient-centric platforms, something that allows patients to be at home, be at ease. So creating a hospital at home is the ideal world to look at. We have some strides towards that, but there's a long way to go, and hopefully other stakeholders help us in the process to make way towards it. One last thing that I'd like to share is I think the overall goal for WKD.SMRT is to create this frictionless convenience care at home where your caregiver can, literally watch over you, and collect data which is real world, which is ambient, which is complete, and that can be used in clinical trials so that other patients like you can benefit from, your disease and the journey that you have had, hopefully to create a way for patients that can be tested earlier in their process, in their journey, so that they can have a simpler disease life, moving forward. Yeah.
I love it. To all of those out there who follow Dr. Joe and I, Michael Davies does so much great work. Strongly encourage you to follow him. But to those young women who are either entrepreneurs or scientists or doctors or in public health trying startups, please do reach out to Mansa Shroff. Her career is really an amazing one, and the advice she has to give is really wonderful. So sorry to give you more work, Mansa, but I think there are a lot of young women out there who can learn a lot from you. So thank you a lot for all you do, both here, but also outside for others. Jennifer Joe, my mentor.
Your mentor, you're my mentor.
Yeah,
Congratulations
okay, so
on ACC Chief Innovation Officer. Super excited about this. Final words today. Really appreciate WKD.SMRT coming on our show. We're doctors and innovators. Well, the innovation community would sometimes complain that we don't innovate enough. And there's lots of good reasons why healthcare needs to be conservative, needs to be really cognizant of delivering meaningful care that helps patients. There's so many technologies out there. Really delighted that brilliant brains, especially aggregating around the Boston area, are taking life-changing, world-changing technologies from other industries like the smart home, which I think, Michael, you're bringing, and really figuring out how that is going to play into healthcare. Mansa, you've really been a leader into figuring out what is digital health, what does it really mean? How do we take the technology from the smart home, apply it into healthcare in a meaningful and safe way? I love that you guys are speeding up our clinical trials because there's so many innovations, new innovations coming down the pipeline that we just really gotta work hard to get to patients faster and easier in the comfort of their own homes. And you guys are really leading the charge in doing that. So very excited about WKD.SMRT. And also just, in my personal, how I'd like to take care of patients, and I think how patients would like to see themselves taken care of, would love to see Ambient AI eventually permeate hospital at home or home-based primary care in a meaningful way, not in a scary way, because the Ambient AI kind of threw me there. So very delighted and about what you're doing. Excited to see your progress. Would love to have you back on the show. Want to say a big thank you to our audience. You can find Dr. Bhatt and me on social media. We will be live again next Tuesday at 12 noon with guest medical director of critical care and telemedicine outreach at UC San Diego, Venkatesh Ramnath, Dr. Ramnath. So talking about the explosion of telemedicine and what that looks like. And also the CTO and VP of Operations and Security Officer at the Burn and Reconstructive Centers of America, Thailand Botskart. So please stay tuned. And thank you to WKD.SMRT for joining us. And I am just gonna, I know I repeat myself. I do that, that's fine. My patients know that. My parents know that. Ending the show with a big shout out today for Dr. Bhatt and her new position as the American College of Cardiology Chief Innovation Officer. Woo!
Thank you. Lots of good work to be done and lots of good partnerships to be had. So looking forward to all of the above.
Thank you to our audience and thank you to Wicked Smart.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Dr. Ami.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.